tonight's Spotlight, the African American vote as Herman Cain sees it.
Many African Americans have been brainwashed into not being open-minded, not even considering a conservative point of view. I have received some of that same vitriol simply because I am running for the Republican nomination as a conservative. So it's just brainwashing and people not being open-minded, pure and simple.
That's a strong word to talk about your fellow African Americans brainwashed.
For 2/3 of them, Wolf, that is the case.
In 2008, 95% of African American voters voted for the Democrat for president. In 2004, 88% of the African American vote voted for the Democrat for president. In 2000, 90% of the African American vote voted for the Democrat for president. Herman Cain believes he could break the Democrats' lock on the African American vote if he became the Republican nominee for president.
I do believe a third would vote for me based upon my own anecdotal feedback. Now, they won't be voting for me because I'm black. They'll be voting for me because of my policies and because of what I'm offering to fix this economy.
Joining me now, Dorian Warren, Assistant Professor of Political Science and Public Affairs at Columbia University and a Fellow at the Roosevelt Institute. Thanks for joining me tonight, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I know professors don't like to go anecdotal, but Herman just went anecdotal on us and said his anecdotal feel for the community is he'd get a third of the African-American vote. What's your gut tell you? If Herman Cain versus Barack Obama?
That's a very disgusting pizza he would be delivering. It's absolutely false.
Is there some explanation other than brainwashing for this, hovering around 90 and with President Obama going up above 90% African-American vote for the Democrat for president?
Absolutely. I mean, first, it's important to say that insulting voters isn't quite the winning strategy to win them over to your platform. But more importantly, what we do know is that African Americans do vote for Democratic candidates on issues that they believe are important to them. African American voters tend to be economically liberal but socially conservative. So he's actually right. Black voters do agree with the Republican Party on some issues, but for them, economics trumps culture. And arguably, the opposite is true for many white working class voters. Often culture and social issues trump their economic interest. So on issue after issue, let's just take the minimum wage. Blacks are highly supportive of the minimum wage, but when Herman Cain was head of the National Restaurant Association, he led a campaign to prevent raising the minimum wage under the Clinton administration. He led the campaign to prevent health care reform. So on those issues, African Americans strongly disagree with him and the Republican Party.
The history of the African American vote, if you go back far enough, you will find that it lines up more closely with Republicans. Then 1956, I guess, Eisenhower pulled in about 39%, which Republicans haven't been able to do since because our politics changed. In the 50s, it was Southern Democrats who were politically the worst enemy of African Americans in this country. And so the Democrats had much more of a struggle in those days on that vote.
Yes, but remember, Lawrence, starting with the Goldwater campaign in 1964, the Republican Party strategy to gaining power was to demonize African Americans and use the race card, so to speak, to recruit Southern whites especially, to their campaigns. Remember, Trent Lott, former Senate Majority Leader, lost his job when he made that comment to Strom Thurmond at his 100th birthday by saying, "See, if you had won the segregationist Dixiecrat nomination."
Well, he left out. He said if you'd won the presidency, he left out that he was running as a segregationist.
That's right.
For the presidency.
That's right. But so Trent Lott says we wouldn't have had all those problems all these years.
Right.
What problems is he referring to?
It's very clear what that meant.
That meant issues of racial justice and equal rights for African Americans.
What about going forward? Would there be a course correction that the Republican Party could take? Could there be some kind of compromises they could make with their current orthodoxy to reach out to other voters?
It would be very hard to believe that they would do that right now. And in fact, Herman Cain is worried about winning black voters. He should be worrying about if blacks can vote in the first place. The Republican Party is launching and coordinating a massive campaign of voter suppression and voter disenfranchisement right now. So in Ohio, for instance, there's a recent bill which changes the law, making it shortening the early voting days in Ohio to prevent folks from being able to go to the polls the Sunday or Saturday or Monday before Election Day, which was the law just 2 months ago. So there is a campaign to actually disenfranchise voters, which disproportionately affects blacks, that the GOP is running. They would have to reverse that effort to try to suppress the vote if they really were serious about winning over black voters.
That is the subject we're going to dig into the next time you come back. In any election cycle, there is always the voter suppression movement that emerges, and we've got to get into that on this election cycle. Professor Dorian Warren of Columbia University, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Lawrence.